Fusion Mobile, quality e-learning experience on the go.
You're welcome everyone to Fusion Mobile e-learning platform. My name is Uchenna Jacob and this is another study session on economics. Today we'll be looking at the topic theory of consumer behavior. The theory of consumer behavior is the kind of a topic that you should know as a consumer before you're able to determine what your demand would be. In one of the study sessions, we talked about want scarcities, how to allocate your resources, scale of preference, rationality in decision making, and so on. Now, we are looking at what the consumer actually has to look at before he's able to arrive at a decision, before he's able to make effective choices. Now, the first thing, the theory actually states something. The theory of consumer behavior states that a consumer, given his tastes and preference and price of other commodities, will continue substituting one unit of a commodity for another up to a point where he enjoys the highest possible satisfaction for each unit of the income he spends. Meaning that when he has not decided on his preference, or when he is not okay in the relationship between what he has to spend and what he has to gain, then he cannot make a decision. So the theory of consumer behavior looks at how the consumer now arrives at what he does, and is how he eventually demands for something or eventually makes a choice. Now the first thing, because we just mentioned at the point where he does what, he will continue to exchange his preference. Preference, another word for preference, of course, is satisfaction. So he has to derive satisfaction. Every human being or consumer wants to satisfy his wants. So in other words, he has to weigh the level of satisfaction he will also get. So in other words, the first point in our study will be the utility concept. After which we look at the types of utility, schools of thoughts in utility, which are Cardinal and Ordinal utility schools of thought. Then we have the indifference curve and budget line analysis, consumer equilibrium, and consumer surplus. That makes up the subtopics for the topic, for what we are going to study for this study session. Now, the first thing, like we just talked about, we said the utility concept. Utility as a concept is the idea behind a consumer's behavior, because utility in economics refers to satisfaction. Now, by definition, utility is defined as the amount of satisfaction derived by a consumer from the consumption of a given amount or quantity of goods or commodities. Definitely, another definition defines utility as the attribute or characteristic possessed by a commodity to yield satisfaction to a consumer. Whichever case you decide to consider, utility is satisfaction. Now, the idea of utility is that the consumer decides what his quest, whenever he wants to consume, is that he wants to maximize this thing called utility. He wants to make sure that he gains the highest possible satisfaction from whatever he gets. Now, the next thing he talks about, okay, we'll look at, that is talking about what? We've talked about the utility concept, what it's all about, and the definition. Then, types of utility we look at is, you have types of utility. I have First one, form utility. I have the other one, time utility. And place utility. Form utility, time utility, and place utility. Now, form utility is the satisfaction that is derivable from a commodity because of a change in its appearance or a reconstruction of its constituents. For instance, we can, when we have wood, nails, and so on. Wood in its form, planks and stuff, do not yield satisfaction, really. But when reconstructed to become what? Chairs and tables, then it becomes what? It yields utility. It is able to bring out something that you can actually enjoy. That's one case. Another case, we could have a cloth, pieces of cloth. Well, on rare cases, you could have, of course, when you have pieces of cloth, you don't really make much use of it. But a tailor has to construct your cloth into what? Clothes. Into clothing before the cloth actually yields satisfaction. So, in other words, changing the appearance of an item so that satisfaction can be derived is what is referred to as form utility. Now, the second one, time utility, is looking at certain things that are able to yield satisfaction just because they are available at a particular place. And the awareness for them is created. So I meant at a particular time, and the awareness is created. For instance, when you are able, okay, when a promotion is going on, you are only able to, for instance, there was a time, there are these sales promotions that goes on where you have buy 5 packs of Indomie noodles and you get plus 1 free. And also, I think there's something like that. Now, these things, you only enjoy the extra satisfaction because that only when you are able to demand for this or make this kind of choice or enjoy these things within the time frame. Or things like fashion. There are certain things that are worn today that are not worn some other time, some periods in time past. Okay? And there are some kinds of things that are no longer in vogue now that was in use. For instance, computer monitors we use, that's too far. A couple of years back, 12 years back, we use mobile phones that just have buttons and stuff. But now, such mobile phones have little or no use because there's much more use of mobile phones now. So, time utility has elapsed on those kind of phones because now there are much more sophisticated ones. The fashion or trend has changed. So, fashion advertisement adds time utility to commodities, while assembling, construction adds form, or processing adds form utility to products. Now, the third one, place utility, is the kind of utility derived from a product or a commodity whenever it is made available at a specific place. That means those things or those services have to be made available at the point where it is needed, where it can yield satisfaction. For instance, goods produced and packed in the warehouse will not yield utility until they are moved to the what? To the markets, where the consumers can have access to them. So, by what means do they get to the market? Through what we call transportation. Warehouse through transportation. Transportation adds place utility to what? To the goods in the warehouse by taking them to the market where they are to be used or they can be demanded for. Okay? Then, also, items, for instance, items at the point of sale will not yield satisfaction to a consumer until it has been taken to the right place where it can be used. For instance, a treadmill in a shop where it is being sold has little or no use to the seller except just to make money. But a treadmill, yes, the one you, is it tread or treadmill? Okay, treadmill, sorry about that. A treadmill has little or no use to the seller when it's in the shop, but getting it from the shop to a gym, it becomes useful, and that is place utility. It has been made available at the gym where it can yield satisfaction. So you see, that talks about what? Form, types, time and place utility, which are the types of utility. Now, the study of utility or the levels of satisfaction has been studied from two schools of thought. That is, schools of thought in utility or approaches to utility. That is our next subtopic, utility schools of thought. Now, the study of utility, I guess you have a brief understanding of them, but to assess your understanding, a few questions will be popping up on your screen. You take a good look at them, try to attempt them, and we'll be back in a moment. Okay. Ready? Okay. Now, moving down to the third one from the outline on this topic, on the study session, you have the utility schools of thought, or we call it the approaches to the study of utility. The approaches to the study of utility, or you call it studies to utility school of thought. Approaches to utility study. That is the different ideologies that, or different ways the concept of utility has been studied. Once the study has been the concept has been studied by two groups of people. They are the Cardinalists and the Ordinalists. So the Ordinalists, the first school of thought we'll be looking at is the Cardinal or Cardinalist utility school. Now, the Cardinal utility is a school of thought that has said that utility can be measured by attaching some numerical values to different levels of satisfaction. So their basic idea or their basic argument is that utility is measurable. Now, their idea comes from the thing they say that the same way we have SI units for, that is a system measurement for things like weights, lengths, and so on. They all, length measured in cm, right? And weight measured in grams and stuff. So in meters and grams. They have come to say that what? That utility is measured in units, standard units called utils. Meaning that if one person eats a bowl or a plate of rice, he could actually say, I have got 5 utils from a plate of rice. So their own is that there can be units, numbers attached to what? To levels of satisfaction. In their study, they had some assumptions. Cardinalist utility assumptions. Assumptions they had. Number one is that they said, should I write this one? I need to write that one. Yeah. Okay. All right. The assumptions. First one, that, of course, the ones we mentioned is that utility is measurable. Two, utility is objective. 3, rationality. 4, consumer. 4, constant marginal utility of money, or constant marginal utility of money, that is price. 5, total utility is additive. And diminishing marginal utility. Now, these are the assumptions by the Cardinalist school of thought. They have said utility is measurable using units they called utils. Now, the other thing, they said the next thing is that utility is objective. Objectivity in this case means that each person, provided we consume the same quantity and the same commodity, that we should derive the same level of satisfaction. That is the objectivity in utility. If I consume a plate of rice, I get 10 utils, which means someone else will consume the same plate of rice and get the same 10 utils. That's an assumption. The next one is rationality of the consumer. The rationality means that the consumer makes the right decision, tries to make sure that whatever he's planning to spend on is not the least important item, but among if not the most, is among the most important item. Then that means that he makes the consumer, rationality of consumer just means that the consumer satisfies his needs or makes decisions based on the order of priority of the needs or wants. Then the next one is that within a particular period, that price, that's what this is all about. Marginal utility of money means price. That price is a constant within that period. That the price of the commodity at that interval is a constant. And the next one is that total utility is additive. That means from a particular bundle of consumption, that means from, let's say, I get to an eatery, I need, I have to take a plate of rice, a bottle of Coke, and a piece of chicken, and what else? Okay, let's say this is just it, and salad. That the whole utility I'm supposed to derive from this is the utility from rice plus the one from Coke plus the one from chicken plus the one from salad. That's what they have said. That the total utility is utility from 1, 2, 3, 4 things that you consumed. Then you can calculate your total utility of a bundle. Now, the last one is that there is diminishing marginal utility. What that means is that as you continue to consume a particular commodity successively, that the level of satisfaction or the number of utils you derive continues to go down up to a point where either you become saturated, that means you no longer derive satisfaction from it, or you become dissatisfied from it. In the case, you will desist from consuming that. Okay, that is talking about diminishing marginal utility, saying that as more of a commodity is consumed, then the less the satisfaction or the level of utils to be derived. And that is the assumptions concerning the cardinalist school of thought, or the cardinalist utility. Now the next point, we'll look at ordinal utility, the ordinalist school of thought. Now in this case, okay, before then, these people studied utility with those assumptions, and they came up with certain things to their own. They came up, they said that utility is measurable, and because of that, they came up with things called the total utility, the marginal utility. These three things, they are concepts or ideas under the cardinal utility school. Now, the cardinalist utility, because they have said things can be measured, so meaning that these things can actually be calculated. All right. Now, the first one, total utility. Total utility here is the whole satisfaction derived from consuming a given quantity, the whole number of quantity, or quantity rather, pardon me, of a commodity. Now, if the product has, you consume 5 units, and each of them has 20 utils each, that means your total utility will be 100, because you have to add. Remember, we said one of the assumptions is that there's additive total utility. Now, that means you have total utility TU equals satisfaction from product X1 plus product X2 plus product X3 up to any number of products. That means X here represents the satisfaction, the utils I derive for each one I consume, each product I consume, this plus this plus this, up to the items that are involved, the quantity that is involved. So, or total utility could also be calculated using average utility multiplied by the quantity consumed. That is where the average utility is given. Now the second one we said, okay, let me take average before marginal. The average utility, in other words, when this is total utility, that means average utility is the utility derived per unit of the items consumed, per unit of a commodity consumed. Meaning that if I could have total utility of 100, of course, it doesn't mean that I derived equal utility from all of them. But if I want to distribute an equal utility, I can now calculate an average unity on a quantity of maybe 20. That means my average utility will be 100 divided by 20 to give me 5 and 5 utils. Now, worthy of note, when you are calculating in an exam situation and we are making calculations on utility or any calculation in economics, you must state the unit of measurement of the answer. Now, here I have 100 and utility from what we heard is measured in utils. So average utility is 5 utils per what? Per unit of commodity consumed. Now, that is about average utility, meaning the util or the satisfaction derived per unit of a given quantity consumed. And that means that average utility AU is equal to total utility divided by the quantity or number of units. Okay, that is total utility, then units consumed. Okay, now the third one, which is marginal utility. Marginal utility is defined as the extra or additional satisfaction that is derived from the consumption of successive or additional units of the same commodity at a time. For instance, the first time you would consume fried rice, as a growing person, okay, this side, okay. Can I? Or is it too? Okay. Here, okay. Let's assume the first time you eat fried rice as a growing person, or let's say a more recent thing, pizza. Yes, from the first time you would consume pizza seems kind of foreign, and there's the hype of you want to taste pizza, what is this all about? It used to be only in the movies, but now when you eat this for the first time, eat it for a second time, a third time, and as the time goes by, you notice the urge for pizza gets reduced. Now, this thing we're talking about is the extra utility you derive, the extra satisfaction you derive anytime you consume the product pizza. At a time, that thing you consume, it gets to a time you just consume because at certain intervals you just get hungry and that's what you want to eat, but not as high as it was the first time you tasted it. Now that thing, every time you eat pizza, there is a particular kind of satisfaction you derive, level you derive, and that extra thing you the satisfaction derived that time for each one you consume, that's referred to as, that's what we refer to as marginal utility. So once again, I repeat the definition. I said marginal utility is the extra or additional utility derived from the consumption of an extra unit of a commodity or product. Now, marginal utility actually measures the change, the rates of increase of the total utility. That's how total utility progresses. Now, the formula MU, marginal utility, is equal to increase or change in total utility divided by increase or change in quantity. That is, in a short form, write it in this way: change in TU by change in Q, where Q, of course, refers to the units consumed. Now, more practically, we'll be using a table to illustrate how we could estimate or calculate the total utility, average, and marginal utilities. This is a utility schedule that we could use to illustrate or apply the formula that we actually studied before now. Now, the first one, to recall, we say total utility is, total utility we could say is the average utility times the quantity consumed. The marginal utility is equal to the change in total utility by the change in the units consumed. And the average utility is the total utility divided by the quantity consumed. Now over here, I have something for marginal utility, total utility, and we have some letters. We are going to make an effort to complete or replace these letters with the required values. All right. Now for A is the marginal utility at 2 plates of rice. This is plates of rice consumed. After consuming 2 plates of rice, the total utility is 160, and we want to find out the utility added, that is the marginal utility. Now what do? The new level of total utility is 160. The former total utility is 100. And the current number of units is 2, the other one minus 1. And I have, what now? 60 utils as the additional utility. Now, that is for A. To calculate for B, I have B is a total utility, the new total utility. And here, remember, to break this down, let me break this down. This is total utility 2 minus TU1 divided by Q2 minus Q1. That is measuring the new and the old one, how you subtract them to get the change. Marginal utility, like we have written, TU2 minus TU1 divided by Q2 less Q1. Now, at 3, the marginal utility is 40, right? 40 is equal to, now, the new total utility is the B we don't know, minus the old one is 160 divided by what now? 3 minus 2. All right. Now I have 3 from 2, you have 1. 1 times 40, I have b minus 160 equals 40. And using mathematical manipulations, I'll have minus this will cross the equality sign. I have b is equal to 40 plus 160. That means the total utility there is equal to 200 utils. Should I tell them to complete the rest? Should I tell? I guess with these examples, you have to complete the other letters from the schedule. Now, moving down our course outline, we have still under the marginal cardinalist approach. Because of the definition of the marginal utility and the way it behaves, they came up with the concept of the law of diminishing marginal utility. Law of diminishing marginal utility. The law of diminishing marginal utility states that the more a consumer consumes successive units of a particular commodity, the extra or additional or marginal utility derived from each successive unit continues to diminish. The more of successive units a consumer of a commodity a consumer continues to consume, the less the marginal or extra units he derives from each successive unit consumed. That is the law of diminishing marginal utility. That means the higher the consumption, the lower the marginal utility. And when marginal utility is 0, when marginal utility equals 0, this implies what we call the saturation point of the consumer. But when marginal utility becomes less than 0, that is negative, it implies dissatisfaction. Meaning that it is no longer of relevance to the consumer. When marginal utility is still greater than 0, the consumer is still having some level of satisfaction, and that means total utility is still increasing. But when marginal utility is 0, you have reached a saturation point and total utility has reached the maximum level. But when it is now negative, which is less than 0, it implies there's dissatisfaction, and it means total utility is reducing. Now, that about the cardinalist idea of utility, or the cardinalist approach to utility. Now, the ordinalist approach, ordinalist utility approach, the ordinalist utility supported a little, some part of the assumptions by the cardinalist, but actually condemned their major findings. The main thing about cardinal utility, we say, is a utility school of thought that believe that that says that utility is measurable by assigning units called utils. That is cardinal. But the ordinalist says that it is not possible for you to do what? For you to measure level of satisfaction, and that is their own. their own, they say, the ordinary school says that utility of derivable from a commodity is only specified by the level of that commodity or quantity of that commodity a consumer puts among his level of preference. That is a quantity of that commodity which the consumer is willing to demand for or willing to consume. And that is what they called what? The revealed preference. That by the revealed preference of a consumer, you are able to attach levels of utility to it. They came up with certain assumptions as well. The assumptions of ordinal utility. Assumptions of ordinal utility. Number one, utility is not measurable. But by what? Revealed preference. Two, total utility is multiplicative. Three, utility is subjective. And four is now the same thing, rationality. Of the consumer. Five, consistency in consumption. Or preference. Then constant price. Now, for the first three opposes the position of the cardinalist utility theory, while the last actually agree, the last three agree with what they also said. So here we have said utility is not measurable but by revealed preference, meaning that it is only by how much a person consumes a product or he is willing to get a product. That is when you would be able to say that someone either prefers or derives high satisfaction for a product or another. Now, but of course, definitely, when two people have Mr. A likes Snap, which is a drink, while Mr. B likes Maltina. Is it WPRB? Okay, yeah. Thank you. While Mr. B likes Maltina. Now, for you to actually know how much A likes Maltina as well, is the quantity of Maltina he wants or he is willing to get or consume at a time. When he consumes 5 of Snap and 7 of Maltina, this is for Mr. B, what happens? Our conclusion is that Mr. B has a higher preference for Maltina to Snap. But for Mr. A, if Mr. A now consumes 10 of Snap and just 7 of Multina, definitely by revealed preference we know that what happens? That Mr. A derives higher satisfaction from the consumption of Snap than from Multina. Now that is what we have called revealed preference. That we only measure utility by the level of what? Preference placed on a commodity by a consumer. Now, the other one, we hear that total utility is multiplicative, unlike the other one that says total utility is additive, that by the time total consumption is a ratio, a combination of 2 or more commodities. And ratios have to come up with constants, and constants, by the time we want to get that, you have to multiply. Multiply A, B, C, D, unlike the other one that we have to add the successive units. Now the third one says utility is subjective. Cardinal said utility is objective, not subjective. Utility is subjective means that it is only the consumer that can estimate or tell how much utility he derives. 2 people consuming the same quantity or the same product, it is not possible for them to have equal utilities. That is what is meant that what? Utility is subjective. It can only be told by the person consuming it. Then the other one, rationality of the consumer, says that the consumer does what? That the consumer makes the right decision. Then the consistency case is a new one. Because the idea of consistency says that the consumer's consumption pattern is stable. That he cannot at a particular time prefer Snap to Multina, and almost the same period of time, at another time interval, he will prefer Multina to Snap. So the assumption here is that if he must maintain a specific level of preference for 2 or more products. Now, the last one, like we explained, talks about what? That the price of the items remain constant for a while. Now, these people, because they are not calculating because the ordinary school does not calculate satisfaction in utils, they came up with the idea of relating the 2 competing ones from a particular from a consumer scale of preference, because there are always 2 things that are competing with each other. That is the two most important things. That is the first and the second one. That is the one that is most important, and the one before that, they are always competing for units of resources. Now, they came up with the idea that if we must estimate, if a consumer if by any chance a consumer does not get, let's say, commodity X, if he doesn't get commodity X, he will use, or if he gets some quantity of commodity X, by anything, he will be distributing what? The resources between commodity X and Y. Meaning that at every point in time, the consumer stands a chance of always allocating his resources between X and Y. That means he will always want to get some of X and some of Y, because he can do so. Now, if he's able to do that, then he's able to maintain a particular level of satisfaction no matter whatever he does. So, let's say, let's be practical a little. A cup of tea. a cup of tea someone wants to take every morning. I would like that. Now, my cup of tea, I use coffee and milk, a combination of coffee and milk. But every point in time, I will need a cup of tea. But it doesn't matter the quantity of coffee or milk. I could have 2 ounces of coffee and 10 ounces or spoons of milk. That's a possibility. These combinations are giving me a cup of tea. Now we know that because of the preference I have for tea, this is the level of, I'm using this as what I will want to get. That is the level I want to reach. But to get to that place, I need 2 commodities. If I don't get coffee, I get milk. I get coffee, I get milk. Like that and like that. So what happens is that no matter the combination of these 2 things, which is like the X and Y, I will always be at this level of satisfaction, which is a cup of tea. Now, at this, I would have there was a relationship which they now referred to as, which they came up with and referred to it as the indifference curve.